Welcome to another edition of Influence, the global podcast that shines a spotlight on the influencer marketing industry. My name is Gordon Glenister. And for those of you that don't know who I am, I'm a keynote speaker, trainer and consultant in the sector and published author on influencer marketing strategy. Influence is also a proud member of the Marketing Podcast Network, where you can listen to other amazing influencer and marketing related shows. So today I'm talking about a niche subject, or maybe not, as my next guest will advocate. I'm delighted to be welcoming TV broadcaster, podcast and celebrity Dan Snow. But just before we start, please don't forget to subscribe to this podcast series just to make sure you don't miss a future episode. So welcome to the show, Dan.
Oh, welcome, Gordon. I'm here to tell you that history is a big old niche.
Yeah, it really is. So just tell our viewers and listeners, for those of you that don't know you, but I'm sure many do, just give us a little bit of a background, because I know you've been a broadcaster and you've got your own podcast show. Perhaps tell us a little bit about how you got started, particularly with the History Channel and stuff like that.
Well, it's really good to be on the podcast because the more I think about it, the more I think basically I am an influencer. I'm an old one, but I think that I had a career, 15-20 year career on BBC, Discovery, History, US History Canada, as a TV presenter, TV host. A very straightforward, conventional career. I remember YouTube was founded, it was 2006. And I was like, making international shows at the time. And I remember looking at these people on YouTube, like Zoella, thinking, what are these kids trying to muscle in here?
Exactly.
And then quite rapidly, I remember thinking, hang on, I think these guys have cracked it. And so even when I was getting, 10, 15 hours of broadcasting a year, long form and then live shows, I remember thinking, I want to be with that. I want to be with those kids over there. The commissioning process, the freedom, the excitement, the seizing the opportunities. I remember back in the day at the BBC, 2004, we released a video podcast, a history video podcast, right? And it went gangbusters, no forward. The BBC commissioned 8 of them. At the end of it, they wouldn't let us do any more. It was in the top 5 downloads up there with Saturday Night and Jonathan Ross. It was doing really, really well. And the BBC just said, no, we're going to try something else. And I remember thinking to myself then, I cannot be in the hands of these people. I need to take some control of this. The world is changing. I'm not saying I was super early adopter, but I was in my early 20s. I was looking at the world around me. My friends were starting to get hardware devices that played video. They were looking for content online. I was thinking, this is wild, man. And then I was making these TV shows, a small thing as well, which would go out once and then they disappear and no one could ever see them again. I was thinking, this seems like a lot of hard work. Yeah. One of my shows went out against the opening ceremony of the Athens Olympics, which at the time was the biggest television event in history. And I was on BBC Two and that was on BBC One. And I was thinking, no, man, not interested in this model anymore. This is wrong. Yeah. So I cast about for years and did all the I should have just obviously sucked it up and started a YouTube thing, but eventually the podcast in 15, which felt late, but turns out was early. Like any advice, anyone listening out there, if you want to do something, it would have been better to do it 5 years ago, but the second best time to do it is right now. So do it. Start it in 15 and it's now doing over 1 million listens a week. So that's good. And that, that's the moment that broke even, the moment that was bringing in money for me, a producer, a team, it was the best feeling of my career, because I suddenly was like, yes, this is what I want. This is now I can make a living digitally and I don't have to go to the man anymore. I don't have to go begging. I don't have to make a fool of myself in these commissioning meetings where I'm like, I think this is a really interesting story that I was looking at. He's going, what is this about? And now I've got this link with the audience. They're up for it. I'm up for it. And you can start making content and it gets supported. And that's my journey towards influencing, basically.
Yeah. And influence is so exciting. And I've been doing this for a little while now. And what I've loved about seeing this connection with the audience, which you just alluded to, has been missing before. And this is why influencers have been so successful, because they get this real feedback from their audience. They know what they want. They listen to them, and it's so well crafted, the content. But when it comes to history, it's a big subject, isn't it? I mean, you think about it, we study it at school, at university. I mean, even my oldest son studied history and loved it. but you know what happens then? And yet I was talking to him about this the other day. He still loves history. He's fascinated. He watches like is it yesteryear on the TV, because you know, it's, and you say that you've got 1 million listeners to your podcast, so it's clearly an opportunity that perhaps some brands are missing by just looking at the typical niches on influence of, you know, fashion, beauty, travel. And what's your thoughts then, Dan, about how brands can potentially connect with celebrities like you?
Gordon, I think your son's not alone. I mean, there's just to rattle through that. I have this chat all the time. People go, it's a bit niche. It's not. I go, well, yeah. Frankly, it's a big enough niche. You know, hundreds of millions of people self-identify as history fans on Facebook. History and heritage. More people go to history and heritage sites every weekend and here in the UK than go to football matches. They go to museums,
wow,
castles, museums. You know, they're all over the country. We've got such a wealth of it here in the UK, and we're very lucky. But it's, you know, obviously, there's a great heritage scene all over the world in many countries. What the other thing is, it's one of the most popular GCSE and A-level subjects. People listening abroad, that's like high school exams, and it's a very popular undergrad. Like, so it's a gigantic subject. It's like a top undergrad subject here in the UK. And then, of course, you know, like gaming. I think how many games have got historical, kind of inspired by history. You've obviously got the age, you know, Empires, Call of Duty, whatever, all that going on. Film and TV. I mean, Game of Thrones is a sort of weird history thing, but you know, you look at, I don't know whether it's you know, whether it's Downton, whether on mainstream TV, whether it's what's it called on Netflix, everyone's watching, like kind of Bodice Ripper last year, the 19th century one, like Bridgerton or whatever it's called. So like actually there's a lot of history about, you know, and then lastly, I would say, as times have got tougher, as Russia looks like it's going to invade Ukraine, as the pandemic has come back, as Trump, Brexit, Johnson, Erdogan, whatever, democracy under assault around the world. People are like, oh, we need to know about this stuff. You know, it turns out, like studying the 1930s might not be such a bad idea. So I've noticed on the podcast, we get massive audiences for, like, you know, is it correct to describe Donald Trump as a fascist? We get historians saying yes and no. Now those episodes go bonkers, like bonkers.
Do they?
And yeah, and there's quite a different audience to the ones that it's just me talking about the Battle of Trafalgar, because those episodes do well as well. Like your kind of blue chip. Yeah, here's a story about the Titanic sinking. We do well in those slightly old demographics, but we notice a sort of younger audience coming to us for those explainers. You know, well, you know, what is going on with Ukraine? What is going on with releasing carbon into our atmosphere and creating climate crisis? Well, of course, it's history. What happened to electric cars? There were more electric cars on the streets in New York in 1900 than there were internal combustion engine cars. What happened there? Well, the answer is technology change, history. So I think when you actually break it down, people realize, oh yeah, I think I'm interested in history really. And I think that we have got, you know, we've got the content, we've got the most gorgeous things in the world. We've got history, by the way, also, you know, regularly tops non-fiction bestseller lists all over the world. You know, you give your aunt, you give your father-in-law the big old tome for Christmas. That's kind of the standard. So for me, it's not super surprising. Well, for me, it's really obvious. And that's why I've made a career in history, and it's why I've built a business history here out of it. And we've got, you know, paying subscribers. We've got reach of millions on social media. And sorry, lastly, I'd say the other reason brands might want to explore it is, as well as giving brand history, we've worked, for example, with quite well-known brands to talk about the history of those organisations, like Lloyd's Register, or you know,
so bringing the history of their brand into, so that it's not just a typical ad break. It's much more about their experience with history.
And if you here in the UK, we've got another, it's also called Lloyd's Bank. They often play off the history, right? We've had Britain's back for 300 years. Well, we work with Lloyd's to dig up a Spitfire, which was donated by Lloyd's Bank to the British government in 1940, right? So they were thrilled about that. So yeah, but the lastly I would say, because you got me on my pet subject now, man. Sorry about this, but lastly is travel. You know, the reasons that people set out travel, history and heritage are always in the top three, particularly for Asians, interestingly. So they want to come. The premium shopping experience, definitely, and is a huge one. But history and heritage, absolutely. What do you do when you go to a country? Yeah, of course, you know, it's R&R on the beach. But and then it might be food and beverage and or shopping, but number three, always in the top three, is what's the local historical site, right? So So we've worked with, I mean, pre-COVID, we worked with a lot of travel and tourist boards who are like, yeah, we think, bringing people to Australia, to wherever the Channel Islands you work with, to emphasise the kind of the history that they can access here is really important. So those are the kind of, that's my pitch basically.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I used to have an incentive travel business many years ago, and one of the biggest growth there was with special interest tours. So people that have a specific interest will go on historical travel trips specifically for the reasons that you've just identified. So all very exciting. Also very exciting, of course, is your trip looming into the depths of coal with Shackleton, so which sounds really exciting. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Thanks, Gordon. Because that, for me, so Shackleton is the world's most famous polar explorer. His ship was crushed in the ice and sunk in the Antarctic in 1915. He then lived on the ice. As the ice broke up, as summer approached, and the temperatures got to the heady, -1 degree centigrade kind of level, he took to the small boats that he'd rescued off the ship, like sort of lifeboat, open boats, rowing boats. They made a hundreds of mile journey through unbelievable conditions to a place called Elephant Island. He then took one of the boats and travelled 700 miles across the Southern Ocean, the world's most dangerous stretch of ocean, to South Georgia. He then walked across South Georgia with its glaciers and mountains in his ragged clothes to get help. And no one ever crossed South Georgia before. No one ever, so bonkers story. We think we might have identified the ship. An expedition got in touch with me last year, so I think we've identified the ship. We're going to go and prove it with underwater archaeology, etc. 3,000 meters down on the seabed. I said to them, "This is why I started history here. This is why, because in the old world, you'd have come to me. I'd go to Discovery Channel or History or BBC, and they'd have taken all the IP and they'd have taken it all. And they told me what to do, and they'd given us a 1 hour program. The expedition and me would have had I'd have gone and had a fun time, but I'd have had no control over it. I wouldn't have been able to tweet or face or do any little live streaming or get in touch with TikTok, see if they want to have a live event or Instagram. No, everything's sewn up, broadcaster in charge. Thank you very much. People from Washington, New York, London ring you up on the sat phone telling you what to say. Right. I said, this is it. This is why I've done it, because we're going to go down there. We've got satellite communication. We're going to podcast. We're talking to YouTube about front pages, from TikTok to Facebook. We're going to go bonkers. We're going to get the words out there. We're going to be podcasting down there. We're going to be doing live TV hits, and then we're going to come back with a documentary as well. So we're going to use all of these tools, all of these things, all of these influencer tools that we've got now to do one of the great, I think probably one of the great kind of influencer campaigns ever, really, which is talking about Shackleton, this shipwreck, the science, the global warming we're going to learn about down there, the iceberg, the sea, the nature. It's going to be extraordinary. So, and this is when I got that phone call from them, I was almost I was sort of shouting down the phone, trying to tell them I knew something like this would come along, because I knew, and this is going to have global interest, right? People.
Mate, I'm tingling as you're talking.
Thank you.
I'm literally tingling, and that doesn't happen for me on an interview often. It's so inspiring. It really is. And you know why? It's because when I speak to people that are so passionate as you are, in bucket loads, about a cause that you love and enjoy, that is what resonates with influential people. That's a fact, I know that you're going to kill this. I know you are.
Thanks, dude. I hope so. Fingers crossed, dude. Thank you very much.
I can just feel it. I really can. And I think that is why brands want to associate with content creators. I often talk about content creators being the next creative agency. They are multi-talented. They're not just presenters. They're videographers, they're podcasters, they're photographers, or even if they're not, they're in control of that. And the reason why I think this whole sector has been hugely successful is because it's the unique authenticity of the story. You haven't got the claws of broadcasters trying to say, we're not happy if you say that, and editing here, editing there, and just as you were saying, it's very, very controlled. Where it's Dan raw, isn't it? And I think there's a lot to be said for that as well. What's the making of what you do? Not just the doing of the program, but it's the behind the scenes which people love. So they feel they're coming on a journey with you.
Well, as you know, Gordon, that's right. So, there's no upper limit on what you can post. That's the extraordinary thing. I mean, I remember reading about, again, the early days of YouTube. We'd all the rest of us would read it like we were reading sort of reports from a distant civilization. But, these kids these days, the making of videos would do just as well as the video. You're like,
That's right. Oh, for sure. For
bonkers.
sure.
And,
Yeah.
and now we recognise that. We totally recognise that. And we're recording. I'll go down this ship and we're recording long interviews with these historians, and we're looking at the charts and looking at the ice flows. That content is going to be great, and it's not for everyone, but that's fine, because as I say, the niche is plenty big enough. Like, there's going to be a load of people out there who are interested in that. It's a truly international story as well. So I think also on your point, I didn't think about that creative agencies point. It's a really interesting one, because it makes me think what we're able to do is we're able to welcome brands and welcome people into this world, going, look, guys, there's actually quite a few opportunities here. In the same way that, I don't know, extreme sports might do, or urban sports, whatever. Like, I'm going, oh, did you not know there's a guy about to dig up an Anglo-Saxon king in East Anglia? It's happening this year, this dig. And people are like, well, I'd like to be part of that. And so I can be the bridge between, because I'm on the ground, right? I'm in the weeds with all these kind of geeky people like me doing these things. This year as well, we're digging up a First World War tank on a battlefield on the Western Front with a group of archaeologists who've been working towards this for 10 years. I've been staying in touch, so I keep, and they're like, right, this year we're going. So I can then bring that out to people and go, right, this is going to be a big deal, everyone. This is going to be, this is the second ever tank recovered from the First War on a battlefield. Amazing stories around it, family members, whatever. That for me is quite an exciting opportunity. And we'll, I know that our audience is going to love it, and I suspect that a wider audience would love that opportunity as well.
Yeah, I think it's also, do you feel as though with video content and podcasts, you can bring these stories to life, which otherwise were just seen in print, and you're really making the audience feel that they could be on the battlefield, they could be, because presumably you're interviewing people as well on some of the shows, on some of the broadcasts that you're doing, and if somebody's has got a grandfather or has got some form of unique connection, of course it adds so much more value to the story, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that's the great blessing that I've had recently, is as the business history that's done better, the resources have been there now to hire really good people. And as we both know, like, it's, when you bring in great producers and great creators, wow, I mean, the quality of our material has gone through the roof recently, because nothing to do with me, but these amazing people that we brought to the team. So you're able, they're coming to me going, we've just found audio archive of Shackleton talking in like 100 years ago. I'm like, what? That's amazing. Like, where do you find that? They're able to bring these stories from the past to life, sound effects, all the kind of, in a way that I was never able to do when I was a one-man band, my little podcast. But and so yeah, I completely agree. So we've talked to one guy whose great grandfather was shot for cowardice in the First World War, and he breaks down in tears. He tells us how that affected his whole family's life in Bradford. They were pariahs for generations, and it affected him down to the 1980s. Still people would, perhaps the family whose ancestor didn't want to serve alongside his mates in the trenches. Turns out his brimming grandfather, of course, had shell shock, all the rest of it, PTSD, was actually incredibly brave. But anyway, so yeah, history is everything that's ever happened to anyone who's ever lived, Gordon. So there is unlimited stock of extraordinary content out there.
Yeah.
And we're never going to run out.
No. I mean, talking about more family history, of course, you are, is it right, you're the great grandfather of David Lloyd-George, the Prime Minister, and you did a program about that, didn't you?
Well, I did. I got in trouble with that. Yeah, because he's my great grandpa, and he was the first working class man to become Prime Minister of this country. He was the only Welsh speaker ever to be Prime Minister of this country, and he was, but his grandson, God knows, his grandson, who's my great uncle, is still alive, very old, almost 100. And he was very upset with me because I'd made a show and we talked about David Lloyd-George's affairs. He had corruption, and he had a love child. And my great uncle, my grandma's older brother, was very, very upset with me. And I didn't really think enough about the consequence. I'm an idiot. But for him, it's his grandpa, right? He didn't really want that in public, and so, but. For me, David Lloyd-George is an historical figure. I don't need to protect him, and I'm interested in warts and all. Right, it makes people more interesting. So yeah, that was an interesting experience.
Yeah. And your children, you've got three children. Are they avid history fans?
Yeah, they are. Yeah, everyone always asks that. They are. I mean, in my family, it's what we do. Like my auntie's historian, my dad and mum love history. So my sisters love history. So we're just brought up, and everyone's like, I didn't really realize there was a thing called history until I went to school and discovered there were other subjects you had to learn. It was a very unpleasant surprise. So it's what we did every weekend. We went for a walk, went to look at a National Trust house or a castle, and we had pub lunch. We went home in the car, and then that was our weekend, right? So I thought that was normal, and And did I enjoy it as a kid? Not much. I'd probably rather like gaming or playing football with my mates, but I just did it, and then you get put up with it, and you learn to love it. And now I do it to my kids because that's how generational trauma works. But yeah, they love it, mate. We're always off doing things. Yeah, we went to Pompeii. I thought during lockdown, like when it was half lockdown, I thought, where's the busiest place I could go in the world where I could take the kids, which will be quieter than ever. And I went to Pompeii, went to Rome, and we looked at all the Colosseum and everything. They love it, yeah. And nowadays it's easy, great for kids because there's all these books, there's online, there's apps, there's video. It's a lot more accessible than we were kids, right? I mean,
Oh
it's great.
God, yeah.
Kids love history.
I totally agree with you. I mean, I can just remember having like just textbooks at school, you know. I mean, I'm obviously older than you, so I can imagine what it was like. I loved history, you know, but I didn't have the sort of audio visual content that we now see, and I think that makes such a big difference. Because if we can encourage the legacy of what they've learnt in school and bring them into the world of history. I think, you know, if you look at some of the great decisions of our life, they're based on historical events in order for us to move forward. It's not just about what are the lessons that we've learnt in history to enable us to move forward. So, you know, a lot of great technological advances have come through history, haven't they?
That's right, man. I'm glad I'm talking to a fellow traveller here, Gordon. It sounds like you're a believer. I like it.
I do. So, lastly, then, what's the future look like? What would your ultimate goal be? Not just from the Shackleton event, but more importantly, I mean, it sounds like you're on a great journey of building and connecting with audiences around the world. But what's the future look like for you?
I'm such a simple. I'm a weird deep down. You know what? My first ever job in TV was going to the battlefield of El Alamein 20 years ago this year. And I drove around in a Land Rover through minefields with a Bedouin guide showing us where all these things happened. There was bits of old scrap metal lying around from the battle. And I thought to myself, I was in my early 20s, like, this is the dream. This is the dream. I could not be more happy and excited. And ultimately, Gordon, that's all I'm doing. I'm just chasing that dream. And now I'm chasing it by building an audience that self-sustains that. So where we've got revenue coming in, we can make our own shows, we can self-commission, which is even better version of that dream. So that's what I want to do. I want to get bigger and bigger. I want to be making the biggest history shows in the world. I want to be doing making sure that we got they're accessible to vast global audience. And of course the other thing is we're going to make sure we're jumping on every new platform that comes along. So now, is it the metaverse? You know, is it a history museum in the metaverse? Is it curated historical experience there that people can visit no matter where they are in the world? So that's something I'm thinking about too. So it's just being the excitement now is I've got this team. We're a business that works with. We have the resource to look at these opportunities and kind of go for them. And that is, startups are really hard, as I'm sure you know. Like not being resource constrained when you've got ideas, but you've got one or two pieces on the board. You can just that's my bet. That on the roulette. That I'm putting my chips there. Putting my chips there. The excitement I've got now in a very unusual position is we're able to think. You know, what is it? Is it do we do more with gaming? We have gaming tournaments. We've already launched our first gaming tournament. That's doing quite well. So it's just ways of expanding that audience, but all of it with a view to getting out there and being privileged enough to walk the same trails, the same mountainsides, the same castle walls as our ancestors, to go to those archives, and to bring those stories to a big global audience. And it is a global audience. People in India love watching English language history shows. In China, there's a passion for history. So it's the sky's the limit really. But keep making those big history events.
No, fantastic. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today, and I wish you all the best for the trip and all the rest of the team. I love your passion and energy, and anything I can do to help promote that, I certainly will.
That means a lot, Gordon. Really, thank you very much for having me on.
That's it for another edition of Influence. Don't forget to subscribe to the show and give me your feedback, gordon@gordonglenister.com, or you can follow me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram or Twitter, where you can also ask me a question. And if you're able to give us a 5-star review, that would be amazing. If you want help in creating an influencer marketing strategy or want to join the Influencer Marketing Roundtable weekly event, just head over to gordonglenister.com. And if you want to find out more about the shows that we're on, head over to marketingpodcastnetwork.net. You might like to check out Jason Fall's Winfluence as well. That's a great show. Thanks as always to my podcast Neil Whiteside from Freedom One, and until next time, from me, Gordon Glenister, it's bye for now.